welcome to this simple guide on how to set up your table loom. I'll take you through step by step creating the warp and threading the loom. This is the loom that I have. It's a 16 shaft Harris table loom. So I'll be setting this up. So what you'll need to set up your loom is your yarns. These are the yarns that I'm going to use. I've got this blue lamb's wool, white lamb's wool and red as well. And then you'll need some scissors. You'll need a ruler with inches on it to work out your EPI. And then you'll just need some string. I've just got some loose string ends here to tie up your warp. You also need a threading hook to thread up your loom. Also a reed hook to thread from the reed. But I lost mine, so I'm just going to use this to do that as well. So I also have this as well. It's just some nails in a bit of wood spread out over each inch. And this will spread the warp evenly across the loom. And then there's also a bit of string with it to keep the warp in place. And then you'll just need your table loom and something to do your warp on. I've got a warping frame here that I'll use. So the first step in creating your warp is to work out what your ends per inch are going to be and how wide you want your warp and how long you want it. For example, you might want 32 ends per inch in your warp, and it's going to be about 12 inches wide and 3 meters long. And the 32 ends per inch will make it quite a bunched together warp. But if you wanted it 8 ends per inch, it would be a bit of a looser warp. So for my project, I'm going to be making some scarves. So I want it to be the maximum length that I can do on my warping frame, which is probably about 10 meters long. And I'm going to do it 15 inches wide. And then for my EPI, I'm going to work out my EPI using the ruler. So the ends per inch determine how many warp ends you're going to have in each inch. So to calculate my ends per inch, I'm just going to wrap my yarn that I'm using for my warp around this ruler, and I'm going to space it out how I'd like it when it's on the loom. You can just go up to ½ inch on the ruler and then double it. So I've got 8 ends here of yarn, so I'll double that to 16, and so my ends per inch are going to be 16. I've also chosen to go with 16 ends per inch because it works out well for my reed, as there are 16 reed dents per inch, so I can just put one end in each dent. Or you might want your warp ends more bunched up like this, where you'll end up using more yarn in your warp. So the 16 ends per inch times by the 15 inches wide means that my warp will have 240 ends in it in total, and it will be 10 meters long, plus you would need to add on an extra 30 centimeters to ½ a meter for warp wastage on the loom. So one way that you can measure the length of your warp to put on your warping frame or warping mill is you can get a bit of string. Say you wanted your warp to be 3 meters long, you could just measure the bit of string to 3 meters and then cut it off. So I now know that this bit of string is 3 meters long. And then I can put it on my warping frame. So I would just make a loop in the end and then put the string on my warping frame Then you put the string on it to where it finishes. This is a bit longer. And then you would set it up on your warping frame. And then with your actual yarn, you can just follow where the string goes. Then you know that will be to the same amount of meters as you've measured your string. So for my warp, I'm just going to do the maximum amount of meters that I can do in this warping frame. And I know that it's going to be 16 ends per inch for 15 inches wide. And this is the kind of design that I'm going to go for. Just a blue and white with some red stripes in it. So all you need for creating a warp is just a longish bit of string and the yarn that you're going to use. So I'm going to start with the red, tie a loop in it, and then put it at the start of my warping frame. So just put your yarn cone on the floor, and then you're going to guide it around. So what you've got to do is to remember for these top ones here and these two bottom ones here, you've got to remember to go over this one and under this one. Then you can go round. And then round the edge of those two. And then for these two, go over and under, then around this last one. So as you can see, I've gone around all of them, and then I'm going to carry it on. And so I've gone around this one here, and I'm going to go back. So you'll always go over and under these two pegs here, and then around these ones, and back the way that I came. And then over and under these two here. Over, under. So you can see here that the yarns are crossing over. This just keeps them all in order and all in the sequence. And the same on these two up here. So now I'm going to change over from the red to my blue yarn. And all you have to do to change colour is just cut off your last colour at either end of the warping wheel. And then simply just tie a knot for the two colours. And then just put it back. Now you've just got your other colour starting. So using this cross section here, I can count out how many warp ends I've got so far. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I know that now I've got 1 inch, 16 ends per inch. And I'm just going to grab my bit of string and just put it through like that. So I'm going to group together each inch with this bit of string. Just going to put it like that so that the string's not in the way, and it's just going to stay like that. And then I'll show you what to do next once I've done the 2nd inch. Also, you want to make sure that the string you've got is long enough that it'll be longer than your warp, so you have enough string to group all of your inches together and tie it off at the end. So now I've got 16 more ends on my warp. And now I'm going to take my string and just put this bit over this group and this bit underneath, and then take this bit up, and I'm just going to put it behind there so it's out of the way. And I can move these. So you can see that that's grouped them together, and that'll just hold them in place. And this step is really important, as you'll want this string all in place for each inch of your warp. For later on when we put it on the loom, you have to spread out your warp across the loom. So you only need to do it down here, you don't have to do it on this one up here. So that's 2 inches done and just 13 more to go. So for the blue sections, I'm going to do them 3 inches wide. And now I've got 3 inches of my warp in the blue, I'm going to switch over to the white. So I'm just going to cut off the last bit of yarn and just tie a little loop in it. And that's my warp all finished. Now with this string, you just need to tie the end of it and still leave it quite loose so that you can move these around and space them out. So the final thing to do with your warp is just to tie it all in place and then take it off. For the first peg, I'm going to group all of these together. I'm going to go through every yarn that's tied on. So the first one and the last one, I'm going to go in the loops. So that's all held together. Now I'm going to tie that. And next I'm going to pick up these bits and put a tie on them. And then for this one, to hold all of these crossed over yarns in place, I'm going to put the string through here and then through the other side, and then just tie it at the end. Now you want to make sure that every metre or so, or maybe just under a metre, all of the warp is held in place. So you want to add ties all along this area. To do this, just separate in half and then grab your string and go underneath, then on top and back through, and then like that. So it's like a figure of 8. And then just tie a knot. And you want that to be tight in place so it doesn't move around easily. So the next tie is going to be here, and it's going to be the same, just going through here and then back through here and then just tying a knot. So that's gone through all the crossed over yarns. Now you can take off your warp. You pull the end off, keeping hold of it in your hand. So put your hand through the loop and then grab the warp, and then you just pull it through. And it's really important that you don't take your hand out of it, because then you can put your hand back in and it's the wrong way round. So keep your hand in the warp and take the warp off, and then pull the next bit of warp through by grabbing the warp and simply pulling it through, keeping your hand going in the warp. Pull the next bit through and then grab it through. So you're making a chain. Take the next bit and pull it through. The next bit, pull it through. And there you have it. It's all in a chain, so it's kept neatly together. Now that I've finished my warp, I can use the ties that I've tied to put in the cross sticks and the back stick. Now go to the front of your warp and you're going to put just a stick, which is going to be your back stick, in through the warp. So using this tie here, you're going to go through with the back stick. So it's like that. Make sure all the loops have been caught and make sure every thread goes around the back stick. Now using a piece of string, tie up either side of the stick so that the warp can't slide off the stick. These are your cross sticks. They should have 2 holes on either side and a piece of string on each side that ties them together. What you're going to do next is put the cross sticks either side of the cross. Make sure that it isn't twisted here. So find your cross. And then put one stick one side and the other on the other side. And double check that it's through all the crossed yarn. So it looks like that. And now you just tie the ends of the stick. You want the sticks to be 1 inch apart. Just tie a knot. Just like that. And the same on the other side. So this is how it should look now with your cross sticks here and your back stick here. Now everything is in place, you can cut all your ties off. You can take this tie out. However, make sure that you keep this spreader tie in place. And now you can take it over to the loom. So I'm at the back of my loom now, and I'm going to put the back stick onto here. So first I'm going to get my back stick and I'm going to attach it on here, just at the ends. Now I'm going to get my makeshift spreader and put it on the loom just here. And what you can do is lay a piece of paper underneath. And I'm just going to wind this back a little bit so it's sat just there. So I know that my warp is 15 inches wide. So I've drawn a little line here in the middle of my spreader, so I know the halfway point. And what I'm going to do is just count where my warp is going to be. So I'm just going to count to 7. So that's 7 gaps, that'll be 7 inches that way, and then 8 more inches this way. I'm just going to put a bit of string there to mark it, so I know that my warp will start there and end there, and each of the nails that I've got in here is about 1 inch apart. So the first gap of my warp is just here. So to spread your warp out all along here, you're going to take your cross sticks, and using this tie which separates all your inches, you're going to grab the first inch from the group so that's my first inch, and I'm going to put it into the first gap. Now get your second inch and put it in the second gap, and now your third inch. So now you can see that it's all spread across 15 inches. And now I'm going to get a piece of string and hold this all in place. So I'm going to put the end of my string, I've just got a knot in it so that I can just hook it over one of the nails, and then just simply go from one side to the other of the nail. And then you go back the opposite way just to lock it in place. And then I can just tie a knot in the end of this bit. The next step is to finish tying on the back stick to the loom. So I'm just going to unwind it a little. And then just find where the ties should go. And just tie them onto your stick. You can see the first one just there. And now I'll do the one in the middle. So I'll find, that's the mark I made for the middle of my warp. So I'll tie it on just there. So now that's tied on, I'm going to wind it closer. Now you can untie your spreader tie and take it off. So as you wind on your warp, you'll want to put something like paper or sticks on your roller as you wind it on to keep the warp even and to keep the tension good. So you could either put sticks in it as you go or use paper, or I use these like beach mats and just put them on it as I wind it. I'm just going to tidy up my yarn a bit as it's a bit tangled here, and just pull through the loose bits. Okay, so it's easier to do this with two people. You could have one person pulling this tight and then the other person winding it on, but I'm just going to pull it tight with one hand and then just wind it on with the other. Now I'm going to grab this and just put it here. So it's just on the roller, which will help me wind it on and keep it even. It might look quite tangled here, but the cross will tidy it up here and make it all even. As you're going, just pull your chain to let out some more of the warp. And with more fibrous, fluffy yarns, this can be more difficult as the fibres can all stick to each other. So with something like this lamb's wool, it's a bit easier. When you get to one of your ties, you can simply just cut it off, but try not to cut any of your warp. So some people will do this different ways. Some people will pull the cross sticks all the way to the front of the loom and pull it from there, but I feel like that would be easier if you had two people. So now I've finished winding this on and I've left about this much at the front. Now with my warp, I'm just going to untie all the leftover ties at the end. But just keep the very last one on there. And with the final bit of string, you're just going to let it guide you so you can cut off your warp at the end. So as you can see, I've got some loops here from where I tied on my warp to the warping frame. So make sure that you go through those loops. I'll just cut my warp and take off that string. And while I've got the spreader still on my loom, I'm just going to find the halfway point of the warp, which is about here. And I'll just keep these two halves separate, and then I can take off the spreader. Now take your sections of warp and just brush it through so it's less tangled at the front. The next step is to bring this forward and then tie it onto the loom so that it hangs like that. So I used to just put it there and have it there, but then I saw someone had it way closer to this side of the loom. So I'm going to try that and have the cross sticks just here so it's closer as you're threading it up so that you can reach them easier. So I'm going to have them here and I'm going to tie them on. On my loom I have these bits of string attached. So I'm just going to grab one of these and just tie it onto here. Just about nearly 2 inches away from the loom. And if you don't have these strings attached to your loom, you can just take a bit of string and pass it through here and use it there instead. So I'm going to do the same on this side now. And then you'll need another long bit of string and you just pass it through here and tie it on here. So now this is stable on here and it will just stay there so that when you thread it up it'll be right there and it won't slip. So now that's all of the work at the back of the loom complete. And now we'll be doing everything else from the front of the loom. I'm just going to take this section here and just group it together, move it to one side. And then now I've just got an uneven amount of heddles on my loom, so I'm just going to rearrange these so that there's a bit more on this side. So what you need to do next is just calculate how many heddles you're going to need. So to do this you just do your EPI. So I've got 16 ends per inch times by your width. So my width is 15 inches and then that will equal 240 ends in total. So with my 240 ends, I'll divide that by how many shafts I'm going to use. And the shafts are just these bits here. So I've got 16 shafts on my loom. So I'm going to use 14 of them for this project. And I'm just going to save the last two, 15 and 16. I'm going to be making scarves, so I'm going to make a selvage. So I'll leave those 2 shafts for my selvage. So I'm going to calculate my 240 ends and I'm going to divide them by the 14 shafts that I'll mainly be using. So that'll be 17.14. So I'll just round that to 17. And then you've got to divide it by 2. So that'll be 8.5. So I'll just round it up to 9. So again, that's just going to be 16 ends per inch times your width, which will make your total ends, and then your total ends divided by how many shafts you're going to be using, and then just divide by 2, and that will give you how many heddles you'll need on each side. So it's just divided by 2 because you'll have half on this side and half on this side. Okay, so now what you're going to do is count out the heddles that you'll need. So I'll need 9 on this side and 9 on this side. So it's good to count them all out and check you've got enough. And then just put them to the middle. And count them out on each shaft, so I'll have 9 on each shaft. So now that I've got all my heddles on my 14 shafts, now I've left shaft 15 and 16 empty, so I'll be using those shafts for my selvage. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll make my selvage 1/2 inch, so I'll need 8 heddles. So I'm just going to put 4 heddles on each shaft, and that's all of my heddles moved across. So now with this side you can count out your heddles just to make sure that you've got enough, but because I'm only using 9, I know that there's more than 9 heddles on all of these, so that's fine. But if you were doing a bigger warp, you might want to check that you definitely have enough so that you don't run out. So now I'm just going to draw out my weaving draft so you can see how I'm going to thread my loom for my pattern. So I'll be using my 16 shafts. So to start off with, I'm going to be doing my selvage. So for my selvage I'll be using shaft 15 and 16, and I'll just be doing it as a plain weave, so it'll just be 15, 16, 15, 16 and so on until I've got to my 1/2 inch of selvage, and then I'll do the rest of my threading. So for the rest I'm going to do a twill threading, and that's just a basic threading, so it'll just simply be shaft 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it'll just be shaft 1 to 14, and then it'll go back to shaft 1 again. So it's really simple, and I'll show you how that works. So you'll need this to thread your loom, and what you'll do is from the front of your loom you will just grab each yarn in the sequence that it's in on the cross sticks. So I'm going to be starting with my heddles just here at the back on shaft 15 and 16. So if I just grab the first one that's on shaft 15 and I grab the first end of yarn, and then you just thread it through the heddle. And then I'm going to get my next one, which will be on shaft 16, and my next end of yarn. And I'll just put this above here so it's not in the way. So next is again going to be shaft 15. Now shaft 16. And then shaft 15. Shaft 16. And then 16. So those are my yarns for my selvage. And that's that finished. Now I'll do the threading of the rest of it. So now I'm going to be going from shaft 1 to shaft 14. So I'll just grab the first heddle on shaft 1, bring it over to here. So that's 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you can put these in groups if you'd like. You could group off every inch just to keep it neat here. And then now I'm just going to go back to shaft 1. So just 1 to 14 again. And that's going to be the sequence. If you could use less shafts though, you could do 1 to 4 or 1 to 8. So now I've just finished my halfway point threading up the loom. So now there are a couple of heddles just left over that I'll just move across to the other side. And now all you have to do with the other side of the loom is just take your heddle from this side, thread it and then move it over. So I'm going to start where I left off on this side. I finished on number 14, so I start again with number 1 on this side. So I'm going to carry on threading the loom, and then once that's done, it'll take me a couple more hours. Then I can thread the reed, and then I can attach it to the front of the loom so that it's ready to weave. So I've finished threading the loom on shafts 1 to 14, and now I've just got 8 ends of yarn left for my selvage on this side. So I'm going to go and do shaft 15, then 16 and then 15, and a plain weave pattern again at the end. So the next thing to do is just to thread your reed, and I've got this nail just to hold the reed in place. So I'll just move it forward, and then there's a hole just here that goes straight through that I can put this nail through, and that will just lock the reed in place so that I can thread it. So you might have a reed like this one that's got a lot of dents in it, or you might have one more like this that's got more gaps. So the reed that's on my loom has 16 dents per inch, and my ends per inch are 16, so I can just do one end of yarn in each dent on the reed. But if you've got 32 ends per inch, you could put 2 ends per dent in the reed. So I'm just going to move my warp over. So you can start from either side. Just take the first bit of yarn from the middle, and on my reed I've just got a line that marks the middle, so I can just take this bit, put my hook through, grab the yarn and pull it through. Now take the next one and put it in the next dent. And each time just make sure that you're selecting the right one in the sequence. So now you need to make sure that you've got a stick tied on to your front apron. Make sure that it looks straight when you pull it up. And then it will go here and you will tie your warp onto it. To tie the warp onto the apron, just take small groups of yarn, split it in half, and then pull it around. Tie one knot and pull it straight. Then get another group of yarn. So I'll just double check that the back looks okay, and that looks really good tension wise. So now I'll just check that they're all at the same kind of tension, and I'll just tighten all of them again. So now that they all feel the same, I can put another knot in all of them. And it's a lot easier to do when you're just using one type of yarn. So now you can take off all the ties that you tied on to the cross sticks. And you can move this back. So the warp's now ready, and now the only thing left to do is just, I've got some random yarn that I'm going to weave and get rid of these gaps. And there we go, all of mine have lifted properly. And I can just start weaving. They're a little loose, so I'm just going to tighten it at the back. So I've just started weaving it, and that's how the pattern comes out with the twill. And also I've got my selvage on shafts 15 and 16 and a plain weave. And then the rest of the shafts have a twill pattern. And that's my loom fully set up now. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, or you can find me on my website and shop. I'll leave the link in the description below.